Week 3 of the MH370 search just ended with the Malaysian government releasing detailed operational data for the first time. And the numbers reveal something unusual. The search vessel is covering 1.8 kilometers per AUV pass, but the equipment specifications say it should only cover 260 meters. By the end of this video, you'll understand what that 3 times discrepancy actually means, why 5.7 meter waves forced the search to halt after reaching the halfway point, and what happens when the weather finally clears on Friday. For the first time since the search began on December 30th, we have official numbers, coverage data, daily progress reports, technical details that Ocean Infinity has never released publicly. The Malaysian government published this information on January 20th, 2026. And what it reveals changes our understanding of how this search is actually being conducted. On Monday, January 20th, the Malaysian government released an operational summary covering the period from January 6th to January 15th. This is the first detailed progress report since the search began. The statement was published on the MH370 family's Facebook page, not through official government channels, not through Ocean Infinity, through the families. Here is what the report says. Between January 6th and January 15th, 2026, search operations aboard Armada 8605 were conducted in the designated search area on the southern side of the 7th Arc. The vessel utilized up to 3 Hugin autonomous underwater vehicles. Operations resumed on January 6th following prior activities and proceeded steadily through the reporting period, subject to technical and environmental conditions. From January 6th to January 14th, search activities were largely uninterrupted. The AUVs were deployed on planned missions, regularly monitored by the vessel, and recovered as required for data download, battery replacement, and preparation for subsequent launches. A brief technical issue on January 7th required the early recovery of 1 AUV. However, this did not significantly impact overall progress, and full 3 AUV operations resumed thereafter. Intermittent handshakes were observed during several missions but did not impede data acquisition or mission continuity. Now that phrase, intermittent handshakes, is important. What this means is that at times the ship had trouble communicating with the AUVs as they were on their mission. The AUVs operate autonomously. They descend to the seabed. They follow pre-programmed search patterns. They communicate with the surface vessel periodically. When those communications fail, it creates risk. The AUVs could potentially become lost. But according to the report, this did not affect the mission. If you want to follow this search like it's happening in real time, hit subscribe. I track every move so you don't have to. The report continues. On January 12th, all 3 Hugin AUVs completed their respective missions and were sequentially recovered to enable data handling and redeployment, ensuring continuity of survey coverage. Weather conditions remained favorable for operations until January 14th, allowing sustained surveying efforts. On January 15th, 2026, search operations were halted due to inclement weather, and all 3 Hugin AUVs were safely recovered aboard Armada 8605. Operations are planned to resume once conditions improve and it is deemed safe to do so. That is the official statement. Now let me show you what the data actually reveals. The Malaysian government report included a table showing daily progress. Between January 6th and January 15th, the search vessel operated for 10 days. Here is what they scanned each day. January 6th, 870 square kilometers. January 7th, 534 square kilometers. January 8th, 467 square kilometers. January 9th, 525 square kilometers. January 10th, 549 square kilometers. January 11th, 498 square kilometers. January 12th, 440 square kilometers. January 13th, 371 square kilometers. January 14th, 72 square kilometers. January 15th, 30 square kilometers. You can see the coverage dropping dramatically on January 14th and 15th. That is when weather conditions began deteriorating. In total, they added 4,336 square kilometers to the previous total of 2,900 square kilometers. That brings the current total to 7,236.4 square kilometers. The target search area is 15,000 square kilometers. That means they have now covered approximately 48% of the planned zone. They are at the halfway point. This story changes quietly and suddenly. Subscribing is how you don't miss the moment it finally breaks. But here is where it gets interesting. The table also shows the daily line distance that the AUVs traveled. This is the total distance the AUVs covered along the seabed as they sent out their side-scan sonar beams. If you divide the area scanned each day by the line distance traveled, you get the width of the coverage swath. And according to analysis by MH370 researchers examining this data, the AUVs appear to be covering approximately 1.8 kilometers per pass, 900 meters per side of the vehicle. But the stated specifications for the Hugin 6000 systems indicate a maximum range of 260 meters per side. That is a 3 times difference. How is Ocean Infinity outperforming the equipment specifications by a factor of 3? This question was raised by viewers analyzing the data, and there are 2 possible explanations. First explanation: the line distance shown in the table represents the distance traveled by each individual AUV, not the collective distance of all 3. If 3 AUVs are operating simultaneously and each travels a certain distance, the total coverage width would be multiplied by 3. That would explain the discrepancy. Second explanation: Ocean Infinity has new technology or operational techniques that allow wider coverage than the published specifications suggest. The former explanation is more likely than the latter. But without clarification from Ocean Infinity, we cannot confirm which is correct. What we do know is this: the search is progressing, the coverage is real, and the data is now public. For the first time, we can see exactly how much area has been scanned and how much remains. Approximately 7,764 square kilometers still need to be covered. That is 52% of the target area. And that brings us to the critical question: will Ocean Infinity have enough time to complete it? If you like this video, please subscribe. We are trying to reach 10,000 subscribers and create more interesting videos with your support. On January 15th, operations halted. The reason was weather. According to MH370 tracker Kevin Rupp, wave conditions reached 5.7 meters. That is approximately 18.7 feet. At those wave heights, AUV deployment becomes dangerous. The autonomous underwater vehicles can operate once submerged, but launching and recovering them requires relatively calm surface conditions. 5.7 meter swells make recovery operations hazardous. Equipment can be damaged, lines can snap, the safety of the crew is at risk. Ocean Infinity made the decision to retrieve all 3 AUVs and wait out the storm. The vessel remains on station. It has not returned to port. It is holding position, trying to keep the bow pointed into the waves, enduring the conditions. But here is what makes this delay significant. Ocean Infinity had extended the search schedule. Originally, the vessel was supposed to return to Fremantle on January 20th, but the schedule was changed. The new arrival date was set for January 29th, an extra 9 days. That extension suggested Ocean Infinity intended to maximize their time on station, to cover as much area as possible before returning to port. But the weather did not cooperate. The storm hit on January the 15th. As of January 20th, the vessel has made minimal progress. The extra week that was added to the schedule has been largely consumed by waiting out the storm. Some observers, including Kevin Rupp, have questioned whether the vessel should have returned to port earlier. Rupp wrote on Twitter, saying, "After a brief respite, conditions are about to get pretty rough for Armada 8605 again. I still don't know why they didn't run for Fremantle. But Ocean Infinity's decision to remain on station may have been based on weather forecasts that predicted improvement. Let me show you what those forecasts indicate. If you want real-time updates the moment the search resumes, subscribe now. No speculation, just facts." Weather models show conditions improving over the next several days. Wednesday, January 21st. Winds up to 30 miles per hour. Still too rough for safe AUV operations. Thursday, January 22nd. Winds dropping to approximately 20 miles per hour. Conditions improving, but still marginal. Friday, January 23rd. Winds forecast at 11 miles per hour by midday. Significantly calmer. If the forecast holds, Friday could mark the resumption of search operations. According to current plans, the vessel is scheduled to leave the search area on January 24th. If weather clears on Friday, they would have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and possibly Monday to operate. 4 days of potential scanning. At the daily coverage rates achieved earlier in the mission, that could add another 1,500 to 2,000 square kilometers to the total. That would bring the overall coverage to approximately 9,000 square kilometers, 60% of the target area. Now let me step back and look at what this data actually tells us. First, the operation is progressing systematically. The AUVs are deploying, scanning, and recovering. Data is being collected. This is active work. Second, technical issues have been minimal. One AUV required early recovery on January 7th, but it was repaired and returned to service. For a deep-sea operation at 4,000 meters depth, this is excellent performance. Third, the coverage rate is consistent. Excluding the weather delay, daily coverage ranged from 371 to 870 square kilometers. That variability is normal. Seabed terrain changes. Some areas require slower, more detailed scanning, but the overall trend is steady progress. Fourth, the halfway milestone is significant. 7,236 square kilometers represents nearly half of the 15,000 square kilometer target. If the search continues at this rate, full coverage would require approximately another 3 weeks of operational time. But that does not account for weather delays, or equipment failures, or the need to return to port for resupply. The real question is whether Ocean Infinity has enough time remaining, and whether the wreckage is even within that target area to begin with. The search zone was selected based on drift modeling, satellite data, and WSPR analysis, but all of those methods involve assumptions. And if those assumptions are wrong, even a perfectly executed search will find nothing. That is the risk Ocean Infinity accepted when they signed the no find, no fee contract. They get $70 million if they find the wreckage. They get nothing if they do not. Every day spent on station costs money. Every delay reduces the probability of completing the full search area. But turning back early guarantees failure. So they wait, they endure the weather, and they hope the forecast is correct. This search is the latest in a series of attempts to locate MH370. The first major search covered 120,000 square kilometers and found nothing. In 2018, Ocean Infinity searched 112,000 square kilometers and also found nothing. Now they are back with refined drift models, improved technology, and a more focused search area. But the fundamental challenge remains. The ocean is vast, the wreckage is small, and the margin for error is tiny. If the search zone is off by even 30 nautical miles, the wreckage could be completely missed. The next 72 hours are critical. If weather clears on Friday as forecast, Ocean Infinity will resume operations. They will scan as much area as possible before departing for Fremantle. We are now at the end of week 3. The search is 48% complete. Weather has caused delays, but progress has been made. The data is public, and the world is watching. As the vessel sits in 18-foot waves waiting for the storm to pass, one question remains. Will the next few days be enough? If you want to know the answer the moment it happens, subscribe now, because when those AUVs go back in the water, you'll be the first to know what they find. Let me know your thoughts below.